Okay, constellation Cepheus, Cepheus the king. In order to find it, we're going to need two other constellations, which will help us out a great deal. To begin, a good time to view would be in early August. You'd be looking to the northeastern horizon at maybe 11 p.m. or midnight. And first, closer to the horizon, you're going to want to find the constellation Triangulum. Additionally, you're going to want to find the constellation Andromeda, which both are fairly easy to pick out. Now the beta star in Triangulum, Beta Trianguli, which is the star I've circled here, will need to be connected with Almach, which is this star circled here, a little bit brighter, and this line between them can be extrapolated up until you hit Eris, which is the gamma star in this asterism. From Eris, you're going to form a triangle, and additionally a rectangle sharing this side here. On the end of the rectangle, the uppermost point, you're going to have this tail of sorts, which actually represents a lower limb of Cepheus, and that rounds out the modern day asterism of Cepheus the king. Some of the brightest stars are listed here. Probably the most famous of them, obviously the Alpha star, is Alderamin, which means the right arm in classical nomenclature, and is about 50 light years away. Its spectral type is A7V, and it's a main sequence star, so it's got a fairly common evolutionary stage. Its radial velocity is negative 11.5 kilometers per second, and you can see this information listed for the rest here, but I'm just going to pick out some of the interesting things about the next three. This star here, Alpherc, Beta Cephei, means the flock, about 600 light years away, and also pretty important to the ancients because it received a classical name. Additionally, Eris, which we use to find the asterism in its entirety, is the gamma star in this constellation. It means the shepherd and would be around the area that the head of Cepheus the king would be located. Also, interesting thing, Delta Cephei lies outside the modern asterism. So what that means is that there are stars dimmer than this delta star within modern asterism. Some interesting deep space objects I've found in the constellation of Cepheus include the star cluster NGC 188, which is located to the west of Eris, which is this point star near the head of Cepheus. Additionally, there are two relatively closely spaced objects. This spiral galaxy here, NGC 6946, which is pretty beautiful, and especially considering that it's face on to us, we're able to see it in its entirety. And also the star cluster NGC 6939, which is circled here in the lower circle of these two. Probably my favorite out of these four is NGC 7538, which is a diffuse nebula, and of course from the picture you can see it's a pretty beautiful object located a little bit below the delta star in this constellation. Now for the mythological story, I chose the story about Cepheus concerning the disaster in his kingdom brought on by Poseidon and the sacrifice of his daughter Andromeda. Now Cepheus was the king of Ethiopia, which is not Ethiopia in its modern location, but a Middle Eastern kingdom that spanned a larger distance, larger area. And he was married to Cassiopeia, who was the mother of his daughter Andromeda, and both Andromeda and Cassiopeia were pretty narcissistic. They were arrogant and they thought themselves very beautiful. Now this arrogance caused some issues with some of the other characters in the story. Poseidon had daughters who were sea nymphs, Poseidon being the god of the sea, and these nymphs were very beautiful. However, Cassiopeia and her daughter Andromeda declared themselves more beautiful than these nymphs. The nymphs complained to their father Poseidon, and Poseidon sent a flood and a sea monster, which we know as Cetus, to ravage Cepheus' kingdom. Obviously, this is not a good thing, and the only option Cepheus was given was to sacrifice his daughter Andromeda to the very monster that was ravaging his kingdom. And so Andromeda was chained to a cliff face on the coast of the ocean, and she was basically awaiting her doom, awaiting to be devoured. And as fate would have it, fate being a pretty central theme in the mythological stories, Perseus is traveling by on an unrelated mission, and he sees her chained up there, falls immediately in love with her, and rescues her. He slays the sea monster, gets her down from the cliff, and brings her back home. And Cepheus, of course, now has pretty much all of his problems solved. His daughter has found someone she loves. His kingdom is no longer under threat. It's restored. And he doesn't have the wrath of Poseidon and the threat of the sea monster breathing down his neck. So he's got all these celebrations planned. Starts to carry them out for this wedding that is coming up between Perseus and Andromeda. But the problem is, Andromeda was already promised to Cepheus' brother Phineus, and when he hears about this younger man, essentially, taking his betrothed wife, he is not happy and basically crashes the celebrations, crashes the party. And he and his men demand Cepheus give over Andromeda back to Phineus. But Cepheus, in a moment of virtue, refuses and values the love Andromeda has for Perseus over the agreement he had had with his brother. So upon receiving this refusal to hand over Andromeda, Phineus and his men attack the men and women of the party that were already celebrating. And Cepheus retreats, but Perseus fights them off both with force and with Medusa's head that he still had with him, and essentially saves the day. I chose this story was because, unlike some of the others where Cepheus plays kind of a background role, in this story he was pretty much at the forefront of all the action. I mean, even in the spots where he wasn't necessarily doing anything, his influence was pretty central. And I enjoyed discovering this moment of virtue towards the end when Cepheus actually basically he goes back on his kingly word and values something greater than just the agreements he's been making. He sees Perseus and Andromeda, they're in love, and he takes this and elevates it above this past agreement he's had. And that's good to see out of this character because it means there's more to him than just his status and his power. He actually has a code with which he rules, which is nice to see out of some of the other mythological accounts when the character is not so heroic or maybe mundane. And here are my sources for the images and also the mythological story which I had chosen for this constellation. Thanks for watching.